All right. Hi, everyone. Today on the show, I have Abhishek. Abhishek is a really good friend of mine, really go back, I don't know, 20, more than 20, around 20 years. And one of the closest friends I have in my life. He has been doing a lot of different things in his life, which we'll talk about today, and super excited to have him here. A lot that he has done is in art, science, technology, building products. And for as long as I've known him, he has been doing something quite interesting. So anytime I speak to him, there's something happening. And the first time I met him was when I moved into my university hostel, where I met him. And actually, somehow it lucked out that we actually found a way to share the room, which was pretty interesting. And I really enjoyed the time there. And since then, it's been a long time. I think if I just give an exact number, people know how old we are. Uh, but yeah, it generally really, really good friend and so much that he has done in his career, in his life, really inspiring for me particularly. One of the things that I have seen him really passionate about is just building products, focusing on getting teams together right from the conception, the idea stage to actually selling that product, having that product on the hands of customers. And obviously that has he has done it so many times. Um, Sometime in his career he also moved from just building stuff but also trying out now make selling stuff, and I think that's what his transition to sales career, which also was quite exciting for me to know about it. And I could just go on and on talking about him and introducing him, so I'm really happy that you are here in the podcast today. This is a long time coming, so thank you so much, Abhishek, for coming in. And how are you doing today?
Great. Firstly, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of what you do in this podcast to deconstruct the career journeys of people that you talk to. Yeah, I'm excited. About me, yes, at a 10,000 feet view of my career journey, I spent early years as a software engineer building technology products, then building teams that build those products as a VP of engineering, and then slowly drifted towards commercial roles in account management and B2B sales. I was very fortunate enough to be part of some early success stories in Singapore, like Wiki.com, which was acquired by Rakuten, Zalora, which is a e-commerce brand here locally, Property Guru, a well-known property portal in this region, and then later some commercial roles with companies like Talent and SAP, which was global. Today, I work as a go-to-market consultant where SaaS companies pick me to review their B2B sales strategies, drive product adoption programs, and just to open new doors in the new market. I'm also a founder for a AI startup. I'm trying to build a niche AI model for a community in Isle of Man. Isle of Man is a little island between the UK and Ireland. It's a crown dependency. And I'm essentially building, think of it as a chat GPT replacement, but with a high context of that community and that small geography. So yeah, that's what I'm doing these days.
Amazing. We can go into so many different threads from what you just described. Maybe before we go into the specific area which you're just doing right now, which I'm super excited to learn more and why you're doing and what you're up to. One of the things that was highlight for me as you introduced you was the transition from building stuff as an engineer and then an engineering leader and then moving to sales, which is quite interesting. I will not say that this is quite uncommon, but how was that journey for you and what made you take the leap?
Oh yeah, I could go on this. As somebody who was building products at some point of time, I figured my sweet spot is in startups and small teams, And when you're working for small teams, usually you do a lot more stuff than just building, writing code, right? You're looking at product market fit, and you're trying to see how users are going to take what you're building. So at some point of time, I realized that I was doing a lot more customer facing sort of work, and it became apparent that I needed to, pick that as a more organized skill set for myself to go full cycle as somebody who had aspirations of, building something that I could essentially take to the market. I'm actually very passionate about building something and then seeing that in the hands of users. And when you get people to put the money on the table, that's when you get the real emotions and real sort of result of what you have built. Was it useful for them or not? So this was more for me to explore the territories of my sort of skill set and things that I wanted to do, and see a full cycle of being able to build something and then take it to the market and sell. So I look at that as a closing of loop.
When you began your career in sales, how were the things that you really enjoyed doing when you were building stuff and leading products? What did you take away from there so that you could apply and make it useful in your sales career?
Today's sales is not really about a lot of persuasive pitch and all of that. Today's sales is very consultative. Like, people need to feel that you understand their needs and understand their pain point in the same way that they are feeling it. And having the background in technology and somebody who could share the pains with them was essentially an important thing for me to bring to the room, which was just helping me elevate those conversations with the CTOs and CIOs and the people who were trying to solve the problems for which I was selling the product.
Yeah, I mean, I would not say I was surprised, because I knew you have been doing so many different things in your earlier part of life that, you can move around. And I really was excited to see what you'll be doing there. And I'm super excited what you're doing right now. So maybe coming closer to the work that you're doing, the experiments and the projects, and also as you said, you just started your own AI company. Super excited to learn a little bit about that before we go into the different rabbit holes that we want to talk about today. So share a little bit about the idea, if you can, on what you're doing with that AI company, and also essentially what led you to that.
Right. So it's called Manx.ai. The word Manx is in reference to the Manx community in Isle of Man. It's a small island nation between the UK and Ireland. I happen to have connections there. I've visited that place, and I have an audience that I felt I could serve. And on the other hand, I've been playing with a lot of stuff that's happening in the AI world. So I saw an opportunity to associate myself with that community, get their data. I'm working with a bunch of local organizations there, and it's really an experiment to see if I could extract the data of a small island nation, and then put that into a very specific generative large language model, train the large language model on a very finite set of data with finite boundaries, and see if it could be useful for the community. So far, the experiments have been quite amazing. It's like people who are sitting in that geography, when they ask questions to a model like GPT-3, they get some responses, but those responses are very generic. But what they get from Manx AI are very specific, actionable responses, because it's trained on a small niche and the small context about Isle of Man, their government data, public domain data, their media, their social feed, and all of that. So yeah, that's where my bet right now is, and I'm exploring. I'm trying to figure out if this is this is going to be something that people will use, and I'm still yet to reach my product market fit on this, but that's where I am. So it's very early stage.
Amazing. I mean, I really like the approach you're taking, especially the GPT models. It's general purpose model by definition. And there's always this narrative around these models being highly influenced by maybe representation and certain representation of data that you get from there. So every niche use case may not have its representation in the training data and with what the model really learns from. Um, with your experimentation in generative AI and large language models, how did you go about it? What was perhaps for our audience, if somebody's already in that rabbit hole or thinking about getting a rabbit hole, tell me a little bit about how was that journey getting into this and trying it out and experimenting with these ideas.
Um, my principle is to let the AI guide me as I build and do the stuff that I do. So as an example, at some point of time, I was thinking, should I take a prompt engineering course? Because everybody needs to know, and there are so many people who are trying to teach you that. But then the idea in the head is, well, AI is there to teach you that, right? So why don't you need to then just go back to your chat GPT to tell you how to get better at using it. And that's just one example of the best thing about what's happening in the AI is that it's there. It's going to support you to even get better at using it. So it's just a mindset. Many times I go back to, when you have a problem, you look at whom can I go and talk to, which is great. You want to know, you probably know people in the community that you can reach out to, or you go and look a book. But that's how we have been trained, right? But I think the new way is AI first. So my first conversation has to start with opening up the ChatGPT window and then start having a conversation and then navigate to the next level.
I mean, this connects obviously to a very interesting area around the tool teaching you how to get better at using it. And I think since the beginning of time of Clippy, I believe that was guiding the users in the Microsoft products and telling you can do this. It was super annoying, but also fun to what we have the state of the art today, where customers are being able to come into a brand new tool and might be a large language model aided system guiding you on how to better use it. How do you see, especially around these hue and cry about prompt engineering will change all your lives and everybody will become a prompt engineer and that's the next new job on the horizon? I know I'm taking a kind of a separate segue from here, but I would love to hear your take on, as you were exploring and experimenting with this, how did you think about generally the whole black art and science of prompt engineering that people are trying to sell other people about?
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to explore and think about and talk about. Um, I think the reason why AI has taken off is because the user option has taken off is because it is making it easy for people to get better at by itself. Now there will always be people who figure out some interesting hacks around how to get stuff done, tips and tricks. All that is important, but I look at it, this is an amazing time. There are not many technologies that have the capability of driving its own adoption the way the generative AI and everything that's happening in this whole space is happening today. One of the biggest challenge I have faced as somebody who was in account management and sales is product adoption. So I think a lot about what does it take for people to from the time they buy the product to they start actively using the product and start getting value from it. And one of the observations is that there's always this lack of either information or fear of change that prevents people from trying the new things, the new ideas, and all of that. Generative AI and chatbots and these chat interfaces are just communication, right? As long as you are thinking about your problems and having more clarity about what you want from it, the more it's going to serve you. So the key philosophy here is, like, you really don't need the gurus to come and tell you what prompt engineering is all about. I think the key here is to understand what do you want, because the more clarity you have about what you want, and if you can articulate that in clear instructions, AI is understanding it and is getting better day by day to understand your instructions well. And somebody who's coming from programming background or tech background, we understand that end of the day, programming is it's just set of instruction set. The more you get clarity about what you want it to do, it could go and get that work done for you.
Maybe I'll put a little bit of controversial pitch already in. Do you predict that maybe in the coming days, years, we basically will move away from a very standardized programming capabilities that we have been all learning and using for the last so many years, and just move everything to natural language? Is that something that comes to your mind, or is it something you think about?
I think my take would be that at some point of time, because we did not have language models in place, we had to talk to computers in a structured instruction format. But I think we need to look at it as the way humans evolved. Computers have evolved, and we have helped them evolve to an extent where now they understand us better. And why not? Like, why not you want to talk to a computer in natural language, and it work out its own nuances of what needs to be done. And GPT-4 and its code interpreter has shown all of that. Like, it could take your natural language, go write piece of code. If there's an error, it'll go fix it till it gets it right. So yes, I think if I look at it, give it a couple of years, and I see that natural language would be the first way a programmer is going to use to be able to write the outcome or the software that they want to make. But it doesn't mean that that you don't have to learn the intricacies. I think it's important to understand that it's an assistant to help you out, but it's the human in the middle who has to come in to define and test the outcomes of what's actually needed, and look at the safety of it and the design and optimization and everything else. So the human in the middle will always be there, and I'm a person who thinks that all of these are assistive technologies, and natural language, for some, it's a natural way of talking, so a natural way of communicating. So it's going to be used more and more.
Let's maybe go back to your venture into applying these large language models to something very niche and unique that you just described. And I'm assuming in the pursuit of that, you may also have a lot of other experiments. Sometimes some experiments failed, some experiments had a success. If you could share a little bit of those trails that you took to get to the current idea and the version of idea that you have, that you're working with in your startup, in your company, what were those ideas? What did you try? What perhaps did work? What perhaps did not work from your pursuit to get to where you are today?
Well, in general, technology ideas and building technology products, I think there's so many goes into this. Primarily understanding what the user needs. I think that's the most important one. And we all are trying to figure out something that we can make, which is relevant for a fairly large, marketplace, so that it pays for its survival in longer term. And most importantly, I mean, and then do I enjoy doing it, right? So there are these things where your commitment, you look at an idea, you look at what's happening in the market and say, can I commit to this for next couple of years, up to 6-7 years? So all those things factor into my own decision making as to what to build and when to build, and my experiments are mostly driven by that. I'm more leaning towards the idea of trying to build small things, get closer to user as soon as possible, and iterate with them. So talking about mistakes, when I was early in my journey, I would first sit down and start coding because that's what I like to do. Today, when I sit down, the first thing that I do is write a distribution plan, and if I'm clear that I have audience that I can serve, I have a distribution plan of getting to that audience, then the next thing is, then I know how to engage that audience and how to get to them, and then iterate on those ideas. So yeah, I mean, in short, my style is get close to your users and your early adopters as soon as possible, and engage them in a way that they help you build a product by giving you the commitment with their credit card.
I really like this part about starting first to think about distribution and working backwards from there. Perhaps if you can share a little bit more around what does it look like for someone who is maybe building any product and they would have to start by thinking about distribution. What should they do? What does it look like for them?
Yeah. So I think life and blood of any software business today, we know is distribution, and I think technology has evolved to a stage where the cost of building something has gone really low, but getting the exposure to the right audience and the right customer, I think is an important one. So when I look at it, I see, I explore where my strengths are, the work that I'm doing, the network that I have, the people that I speak with. And distribution strategy essentially means that you have in your head a clear idea about, and if I had a product ready today, first 30 days to 90 days, how am I going to get from that 0 to 100 to 1,000 users, and most importantly, not just the product, but what kind of overall offer do I have for them to stick on and commit with me. And sometimes it's studying what's there in the market. It's about getting validation about competitors, who are already way ahead and looking at, are already solving some problems, but also have pain points. Sometimes you're just looking at a product that is there being used by people, and they're not happy with, so you're going in to essentially take over that market. So yeah, that's in a sense, you have to figure out what your audience, where your audience today is engaging, and what your steps are to go get their attention.
Very interesting. I don't know if this is something you're willing to share, but would love to know, with the current idea that you are exploring, I think this Isle of Man, building the specific niche model for them and for that community. What did distribution look like?
Yeah, well, I can share a few things. Uh, Firstly, the reason that I picked that idea and the geography was because I thought I could build because I have access to that audience, but also I'm a big fan of looking at different niche and markets. I'm sitting here in Singapore. It's a little red dot on the entire map. So when I start an idea or business, I don't look at this is going to be big, a global play. What I want to do is, I understand that geography, my customer persona, and I'll not say that I fully understand the people of Manx community and Isle of Man, but I understand what an island market is all about, and I understand what political and social boundaries are, and what opportunity that gives to me. So in this case, it's an island with 84,000 population, and when I look at it, I look at cost of reaching to that audience, and what does it take for me to get my word out there, and can I build something for that geography which is relevant for the entire audience that I'm targeting. So it's a bet. It's a bet. We don't know, it's going to work out or not. But the idea is, I have an audience sitting in a specific boundary. I have a way to reach out to them, which is the minor details. But and I know what they're looking for.
Very interesting. If I may take an attempt to really break down the aspect about thinking of distributions first, uh, what would be the key elements that you would see that are part of thinking about distribution? And maybe a concrete picture would be, let's say, we have so many development models of startup. I remember a business model canvas and lean startup philosophy. Everybody starts with think about this and this and this. If you had to quantify when you're thinking about distribution, these maybe two, three, four or more are the aspects that you should always consider, and that perhaps kind of provides a first version of it. So, what could be those according to you, as you have now explained how the distribution and how you thought about the distribution in your current venture?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll take a different example. Like if you are building a product which has to serve developers, and essentially it's for engineering community, right? A distribution could look like, from perspective of its strategy, would look like, what does it take for you to reach all of your audience, and do you have an ability to go reach out? So some people are really good at creating the audience. Like you have a pretty good following of people, the developer community that you can target because of certain affiliation, because of the fact that you come from that, and then you create content for their career progression. So you have a segment of users that you can target, and that's why people build large audiences. So that's one example which you can tap on. But people who do not have a pre-built audience for themselves, they usually look at how am I going to engage them. So open source communities, they form, they come together. You throw something in the community, start a GitHub project, create a community around that, and start engaging people with that conversation. So that's one idea of getting closer to that audience. So as somebody who is building tools or products for that audience segment, you've got to see where do they hang out, and do I have access? Can I get into the door in a very respectful way, not by buying a pass and being forceful, which is what happens most of the time. But can I enter the room and still gain the respect so that they would listen to me? and I get my 60 seconds to tell them about how I'm going to solve their problem. So at a high level, that's what a distribution strategy is all about. In the nitty gritty, it's just lineup of the different audience segments, the channels that you will need to get to them, and the medium that you'll use to travel, get your message traveling to them.
Amazing. I think this is super interesting to learn from you and how you think about this. And I believe people who would be listening or watching this could take inspiration from here. I want to maybe go back to from a technology centric view of applications of large language models in the ecosystem. I think there's no single day that goes by where you haven't seen somebody or something applying large language models. I don't know if you paid attention to the World Economic Forum in Davos. I think every CEO who was interviewed had some AI strategy. I saw the updates in CES this year in, I think, Las Vegas. They were like incumbents, large players. I think Siemens did a big hue and cry about AI. So it's like everybody is getting on the bandwagon. It feels like this is the new app store. Like everybody has an app. If you remember the 2008-9 period, how do you read at a high level this hype? Is it a worth in terms of time and opportunity for entrepreneurs, builders to start something? Is it that the gold rush that it's actually how other people are talking about, or do you see it differently?
It's a very deep and deep question, but a great question. I I personally think that we've gone through many hype cycles. So for some technology adoption, hype is good because you need certain momentum to drive. AI doesn't need it. I think blockchain needed it. Like you needed sufficient momentum to drive. Um, I think AI does not need hype. It's got a clear use case. The users know what value that it can bring to them. I think there is a behavior, there's a FOMO, a fear of missing out, that is quite prevalent um, in the market at this moment. And you know, if I reflect back and look at the year of 2023, it was an intense year, intense from two perspectives. Intense positivity, optimism that we've seen the adoption and the growth in everybody coming together and proving that AI and LLMs are actually ready for real use cases. But also, it is the first time that there was high intensity in terms of fear. Like the fear was about, this is for the first time people feel that the rate of change is so high that it's really going to affect their lives very quickly. I think when the print press came into this world, or when steam engine came into the world, people still had time. But when 2023 ChatGPT launches and everybody else rushed to get into the game, because there is something about it. It's no question about whether it's going to change my life. It's about when it's going to change my life and am I prepared for it. And that has created a lot of FOMO, and that's driving certain behaviors where people understand this at a surface level, and then they're making choices with what that surface level understanding is. And they're sometimes it's good, sometimes it could be dangerous if people don't look below the surface, because all what generative AI is all about is it's the next word prediction, and it's really that, all it can do is, given a large set of words, it just does generation of the next word, right? Does it fit all kinds of use cases? I don't know. Does it fit your business needs today? All businesses, I don't know. But I think it's worth learning more about the technology at this moment.
I totally agree with you. And I think from my reflection, looking at the different GPT apps that currently exist, and I think OpenAI recently launched, I think almost like a store setup, marketplace of sorts. Um, I mean, there are some interesting use cases of apps in there, but the rest feels like toy projects that are somehow pretending to do everything under the sun. So I totally agree with that reflection. What has been some of the exciting findings for you as you went on exploration journey in this area, which was surprising for you, or you did not expect the quality and the aspect of technology good enough for you to really take a bet on it?
Yeah. So I think the key realization was that everything in generative AI specifically, because that's the space that I'm looking at, is really generative. It's not decision making. So when you have large corpus of data that you give it to a system based on what you've given to it, it increases the probability of what can come out next as next prediction. It's mostly towards um, you know generating the new ideas, generating the content based on what you have fed into the model. Uh, People confuse that AI is smart enough, or these models are smart enough to take mature decisions for you. Maybe it's going to get better as we go along, but in technology terms, there's no if or else in the LLM model. It's at the core of it, as I said, it's a bunch of word and it predicts the next word. That's all it is. Now you can put a lot of things around it to make it look like what ChatGPT and GPT-4 provides you, but it's just that. Then you need other different ways to augment that with code interpreter and essentially put the reasoning into the entire spectrum. But I think those are separate worlds altogether. So as a technology, we have only got to a stage where we have got the generative aspect of it right. I think the reasoning is an area which still needs to be developed, and everybody's going to have different interpretation of it and need for it. So it's important to do a fact check and say, do I understand it? Do I understand that this is not reasoning? This is purely next word prediction.
So we're not ready to outsource reasoning just yet.
Exactly, yes. And this is why I think people get confused and say, I'm going to have an assistant is going to do some stuff for me. Yes, at a surface level, few toy projects look really good. But the way I see it is, the real use case is when you have a co-pilot to whom you can ask question, it gives you a response, but you've got a process in your head, right? So it's just assisting you in getting your thinking and questions further refined. But yeah, it's not, you will not trust it to do certain things, not just yet.
All right. Maybe my last point around this, where I would love to hear what you think about it, and we can then move on to other interesting areas for us to talk about in the remaining time we have. In the introduction about you, I think I did mention about your foray in art. And I think you're also surrounded by people who are into that art, whether it's musical art or different creative pursuits. What is your reading so far around the generative technologies, especially AI technologies, in affecting the art, creative pursuits that people have? There has been back and forth around that being a threat, especially I think in the US, there was a strike in the creative industry, especially those who produce films and TV series and other motion pictures, who were afraid that a generative technology would take away their jobs. How do you read that situation, being an art area, but also surrounded by people who are close to you, who are into very deeply into the creative pursuits?
Yeah, I think I'm generally an optimist, and I think all these things are going to help humans increase productivity. But when it comes to art, uh, what we have done is given machines data to look at it and then reproduce some of the work uh, through combination and inspiration. If you look at it in the intrinsic sense, the art progresses from inspiration from things that you observe around you, right? Art is all about that. Art is about looking at walking in the garden, and you figure out something, and then you get inspiration, and then you go, either you create a song or you create a painting. It's driven through inspiration. And what we've done is we've made technology so advanced that we've given it all the data because it can remember, right? A human brain can only remember some stuff, but machines can remember large data sets. And now it can actually take inspiration from more things and then put things together, which is perceived as a new form of that, or reproduction of that content that you give to it. So if art for you was a way of expressing yourself and taking inspiration from the world around you and interpreting and giving it to you, I think it's scary, but machines are getting closer to be able to generate something as good. Now, as an optimist, I think about it and say we should look at it as another form of inspiration and say, what can we do and build with it, right? But for some people, I can understand why they can be upset, because now it's going to be, if for an artist it takes 12 hours of thinking through certain things to be able to come with a symphony or a painting, ChatGPT can actually do illustrations and also produce music, which is good for most of the use cases or needs of the commercial context or customers. So yeah, so I think it's a little bit scary, and I understand why people would be upset. But on the other hand, I think look at it from positive aspect, it's going to help artists scale themselves. Like I can see people, actors and script writers and people who do creative work. I see them as becoming 10 times more productive. Imagine, we are in a world where the quality of content, like deep fakes that are getting created, the fact that you can take an actor's face and then produce the whole story in the film. Yeah, I mean, the big actors just need to license their face, and then the production happens without the hard work of actually going into the studios and countless hours of producing something. So yeah, I'm actually quite positive that people will take it with the right spirit and let it help them out.
Amazing. We'll take a obviously shift. I think we spend a lot of time on generative technologies, and I know we will also be running out of time relatively quickly. I would love to hear a little bit about your experience being in Singapore, especially in the tech product scene there. How have you seen in the last years that being shifting. The narrative that I always have in my mind when I hear about Singapore is it's a very interesting place to for entrepreneurs to come in and build stuff. I've had friends who actually moved from Europe to Singapore. One of them moved very recently, and they were in this pursuit that this is the place to do interesting stuff. And actually you can reach out to other customers, especially the Asian markets, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, or ASEAN markets. I think you are a person who can provide a lot of interesting context around that, being in that space for a long time and have seen different companies of different sizes. So, what is your take on that? How do you see this rise as well, also the current state of product technology scene in that part of the world?
So Singapore is continuing to be the model nation to run the experiments if you want to run, and I think government understands it and they understand their role in promoting it. So I think that ecosystem is still quite strong. And yes, you're right. Like this is a place. It's a hub to sort of cover the ASEAN countries in the region. There's a lot of cultural diversity here. So, from one perspective, it could be a good ground for running experiments on an island nation, which is what you see. I'm fascinated about small geographies and niche and small experiment and prove your idea and whether it works in a small sort of experimental ecosystem and then take it to the world. So if your goal is that, then Singapore still is a good place. Although post pandemic, there are the inflation is rising. People, people are now used to remote working. So whether they want to be in a high cost place or not, I think people have started to ask these questions. But in general, I feel positive about where Singapore is headed. But also, if you look at just this region, the cultural diversity is a good thing, but also could be a challenge for people because if you take technology and try to launch in this region, it needs to be sort of, it has its own pace of first getting translated into the norms of different countries and language and culture, which is a real challenge. So it's important to understand that if you're sitting in the US, if you go and you launch something, it's for the whole audience of the America, same language, or same for some parts of Europe as well. But when you come over here, it's really pockets of completely different cultures. So what works in Singapore, it doesn't work in Malaysia, it doesn't work in Vietnam. They are completely in different place altogether. So yeah, it's important thing to keep in mind that the cultural diversity is good if you know how to make use of it. On the other hand, it could delay everything that you want to do because everything just takes longer time to distribute.
Very interesting. Could you also comment on perhaps what led to the let's say this rise of Singapore as that country to do this kind of interesting work, especially because it's very interesting to see a country like that, a very small country like that, really rising. And I haven't had a great reading of the history. I know it has gone through a lot and an interesting transition. But if you could summarize for the audience around your take on what led to it, what were the things that you felt or you heard or also you read that perhaps brought Singapore to the current perception that it has across the world? That'll be great.
Yeah, so I've spent about 13 years here, and I came when the startup ecosystem was just starting, and there were only few players here, and I was lucky enough to be part of some of the notable success stories here. And if I reflect on that journey, I see that there are a few things that stands out. Number one, some point of time, the government understood what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, and they went full in. They created. They signed up for the idea that they wanted to be self-sufficient as a nation. So they started creating programs and campaigns, and list down the problem, just like in design thinking. You list down the problem and try to sort of bring the right people to help solve that. It's an island nation, so it's good weather. People from all over the world want to come and like the consistency of the way the nature has put the weather here.
I think I was saying that the weather, I think, is obviously one of the big contributors to this. I believe also the same thing applied to San Francisco and that part of the world. The weather was one of the big highlights. But I appreciate how you thought through different things here. I mean, it's very unfair to compress the entire history of Singapore in just 2 minutes. What led to it, and maybe that perhaps requires a separate take on it. Uh, as we're concluding our conversation today, Abhishek, we just started with 2024. What is your thinking about this year, especially related to the work you are doing, the technologies that you have been leveraging, the sector, the space that you are? What are the things you are thinking about in 2024?
2024, I think, is going to be a good year. From my perspective, everything in the technology space on the AI side is going to start to take some shape and maturity. I think this is also a year where the adoption of blockchain is going to start fusing into some of the use cases in the AI. I think as people think about trust and safety and all of that, blockchain will play some role in proving the authenticity. And so I think we'll see some activity there. But generally, I think AI safety and areas around how to make these models more secure, that's something that I'm looking forward to. I want to see some progress there. I'm very optimistic about what we'll see in 2024.
You are an optimistic person, and also I've always known you like one. As we wrap up, want to hear a little bit about what are you consuming in terms of content, whether it's reading or podcasts or anything that you would recommend the people who are listening to this or watching this podcast. What are your consumption recommendation?
Sure. So it varies from time to time, but I think currently I'm at a stage where I'm really letting the AI world consume me as much as possible. So a lot of content is really technical, content, programming books, mostly around that. But I do recall there's one book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I actually have behind me as well. It's Marcus Aurelius, and that's one book that I go back to quite often. Maybe not just to go through it, but just open the book and sometimes just go through a few pages to sort of reflect upon what has happened, like the wisdom of the history, because I think what we are facing has already happened in the history in some shape and form. So there's a lot to learn. So I let that inspire me. So that's usually the book that I'm these days going to. But other than that, I'm really just I'm low on the information diet. I am more on understanding and asking more questions through ChatGPT, and getting better at asking better questions.
I would keep that as a motto, reduce your information diet and keep it simple. I also loved the book Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It was surprising that to me to learn that this was like personal diary of one of the most powerful person of that time, which somehow got written down and shared and passed on to the modern generation. The last question I have for you, Abhishek, is not an advice that you give to other people, but generally someone who was who is starting right now and getting into technology products in 2024, what would you say to them to help them navigate this transformational age that this last years have been, but also to take on what's coming up?
Yeah, well, if it's for somebody who's just starting out in their career, then I would say um, there's a lot of stuff going on. So learning to sort of filter the noise around you is an important skill set to build. It's really the time to focus on your human abilities and not the mechanical skill sets. So I think anything that you can do and to start paying attention to how your brain works and your human abilities, I think that's an important thing to focus on. Um, I think to navigate today's world, the only thing I feel more important is to get closer to good leaders. Identify how do you get better at, like, knowing people, knowing what good looks like in terms of leadership, and then once you've identified somebody that you like working with, go all in. I think this is a time when you want to find people who share same passions and inspiration as you, and really like double down, because you will need the energy to go vertically deep down to do something meaningful. I think rest AI can take care.
Amazing. With that, I want to thank you for taking your time today to come on this podcast. It's the first time that I have had you. I think when I started this in 2020, just as a personal experiment, I had few people on my mind, and I think one of them obviously was you. So finally, after 4 years, it has happened. So I'm super happy to do that, and I hope this was as interesting for you as it was for me. So thank you so much, Abhishek, for coming over.
No, absolutely, it's my pleasure, and I always treasure this relationship, and also the way you ask these questions and get into people's mind, uh, to understand and bring value to everybody who's listening. So yeah, thanks for bringing me on.